When I left Hellman Associates in '86 to take the leap, just total freelance, first time ever, I also decided I'm going to start to look for an agent. And my first priority in looking for an agent was to find somebody in New York. I didn't want a regional agent. I didn't want some guy in Chicago that's going to get a lot of hardware illustration. I wanted somebody in New York City. And I don't know what I guess it's karma or something, but at the time I started to look, this guy named Richard Solomon called me out of the blue, just out of the blue, and asked if I was by any chance looking for an agent. And because he was pretty new to the scene, and I was looking for an agent, and I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. So we had a long conversation on the phone. I went out there and we met, and things worked out. That was 22 years ago, and we're still together, and we've never had any major, disputes or anything. He's a good agent. He's a tough agent. I think people negotiating with him don't like him very well because of that, but he's very fair, and he's very honest, and he's very sensitive to what we need to do. He's also very proactive. These are challenging times, and he has gone out and found new ways to apply, sell, promote illustration. The biggest thing he's done, and he figured this out about 3 or 4 years ago, the biggest thing he's done is create this parallel entity to Richard Solomon, artist representative, which is the group that gets me work for, whoever. If it's sometimes editorial, sometimes it's, big advertising assignments. But in addition to that part of his business, he created a new entity a couple, 3 years ago called Art on a Grand Scale. And that is promoting his group, his illustrators, as mural artists, as muralists. Sometimes it's direct work, but most often it's the kind of, it's the kind of stuff that's enlarged digitally and put up like wallpaper, essentially, or like billboards. And that has filled in the gaps. That has really helped keep us healthy. I've done murals that are 80 feet across. I've done murals that are 10 feet across. I guess that's the quickest thing. If I'm at a party or something, somebody says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm an illustrator," and they have no idea what that is. I said, "Well, the murals in Barnes & Noble, all the characters, all the authors sitting around having coffee or drinks or whatever. I did that. I did that way back in the 90s, early 90s, before we had Art on a Grand Scale. But that helps promote Art on a Grand. That's the, no pun intended, the poster boy for Art on a Grand Scale. Now I've just completed a new mural for them, probably the same size, and that will go up in new stores or renovated stores. Much more colorful, and they revolve around characters from literature instead of authors. And for the setting for the characters, I put them all at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Well, the process, of course, is to start with, for the mural, is to start with the wall. And I, as I said before somewhere in this interview, I always start with a rectangle and fill it up. And so with a mural, you have a certain space, obviously. Then you have a subject matter, and you work out your composition. It's the same. Essentially, it's the same as doing a really horizontal editorial piece. I mean, we have a great group of artists in the Art on a Grand Scale side of Solomon reps, and all the way from Rudy Gutierrez, who is a New York artist that's work looks very street smart. It looks like graffiti a lot. And it's wonderful stuff. Stephen Johnson, who's done some stuff in the New York subways. He lives in Kansas, actually, and he's one of our group, and he's done like big torn paper abstract murals, and all the way from that to the very realistic stuff. Greg's done his share of murals. I've done But, well, I've got one on my list to do right now, and I just finished one, and I'll bet I've averaged a mural a year for the last 5 years. I've done about, I think it's 20 picture books now, and I've been doing them for about the last 20 years. They're pretty esoteric projects. I have the great good fortune to work a lot with a publisher called Creative Editions, and they are open to my projects. The most recent project that Creative and I did together was a book that I conceived called Paganini, the Dark Fiddler. It's the story of Paganini selling his soul to the devil in Italy in the 18th century, which was sparked in my mind by the story of Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil in Mississippi in the 1930s. That was the book I did before Paganini. It was Black Cat Bone. I start by reading the manuscript and earmarking or checking visual passages that I think are particularly appropriate for moving the story forward. Then I do a little thumbnail of the entire book, just tiny scribbles and notes, and I try to get that approved by the art director. And then the next stage is to realize more finished sketches. So I do my research, which is very important. I look for my inspiration artistically, and then I build my sketches that way. And I keep the sketches taped onto a piece of foam core on the shelf throughout the project, so I can constantly refer at a glance to the entire book. I think it's important to pace a book in a certain way. I want to make sure that there's a really interesting mix of say portraiture, landscape, still life, action scenes, all kinds of variety of imagery in the book itself. So when I visualize the book, the overall pace of the book, I'm trying to interact those kind of images as much as I can. I'm also trying to interact the pace, make the pace work of single page to spread to spot, illustrations that way, left hand or right hand. On this page I want a spot, or I want 4 spots in a row or something like that. And then the designer takes over and makes it a beautiful book. The first ones I did were Ray Bradbury stories, which were pretty cool to work on. The first major book I did for Creative was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And that was a blast because that's one of my all-time favorite stories. I did a lot of research. I went to Sleepy Hollow. I did my on-site drawings and photography. The settings are all accurate. I love that kind of research. But I chose to tell that story as if the Headless Horseman did exist and was not some figment of Ichabod's imagination, or was not Brom Bones with a cape over his head. I always hated that about the cartoon version. I hated that. I wanted there to be a Headless Horseman. Then I did Rip Van Winkle for them. I did The Necklace by Maupassant. Edgar Allan Poe, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. That was my first book of monotypes. I was the theme artist, they call it, for the Super Bowl. I've done that twice. That's always fun. That means you do the cover art, the program cover, the ticket, the poster, all these things. I was the theme artist, the same kind of deal for the NBA All-Star Game in New York. That was back in '98 also. And the same, they used the art for the ticket, program cover. I got to go to all the parties and all the events that swirl around the NBA All-Star weekend. Also, I have to say, it's a real rush to get out of a cab in front of Madison Square Garden and see your art like probably 4 stories high on the side of Madison Square Garden. I mean, that is if I say I'm a public artist, that is public art.